Job seekers, it's 2026. And yes, robots can do almost everything now. You say you want to work from home. I say you don't even need to show up at all. You work at a snail's pace, at double the cost, using quadruple the space. And then wonder why employers are rethinking the workforce. That's exactly why I created this podcast. Not to scare you, but to prepare you.
Welcome back to Working in Ontario. It's 2026, and workplace injuries are still happening every single day, not because workers are careless, but because work is physical, repetitive, stressful, and sometimes dangerous.
Workplace injuries and illnesses don't always show up in a job description, but when they happen, you need to know how the system works in Ontario. Today's episode is about W.S.I.B. What it is when it applies, how claims actually work, and what the system expects from both workers and employers.
Before we begin, a quick reminder. What we discuss today is for general educational and informational purposes only and does not replace legal, medical, or professional advice. If you have specific questions about your case or benefits, you should speak with a qualified professional or contact W.S.I.B directly.
Most workers don't think about W.S.I.B until they need it. Then it becomes urgent. That's why understanding the system before you're injured matters.
We'll explain what W.S.I.B is, when to file a claim, how to file it properly, and what happens after you submit your information, including trends and timelines in 2025.
The Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, or W.S.I.B, is Ontario's no-fault system for workplace injury and illness insurance.
No fault means your eligibility for benefits doesn't depend on proving employer negligence. It depends on whether your injury or illness is work-related.
This system replaces the old tort process for most work injuries and focuses on medical recovery, wage replacement, return to work, and support.
You should file a claim when a workplace injury or illness happens, whether it's a physical injury, repetitive strain, or a psychological work-related injury.
If you experience symptoms due to workplace stress, harassment, trauma, or cumulative psychological exposure at work, that can be a valid psychological injury claim under W.S.I.B.
Here's the basic process.
First, report the injury or illness to your employer as soon as possible.
Next, complete the worker section of the W.S.I.B claim forms, often called Form 6.
Your employer must also complete their section, typically with their payroll and incident details.
You may also have a doctor complete a functional abilities form, which describes your limitations and prognosis.
Once submitted, W.S.I.B assigns your case a claim number. An adjudicator reviews whether your condition is work-related.
They look at timing, what you were doing on the job, medical evidence, and consistency in reporting.
You can request a copy of your claim file. If you pursue an appeal, you can obtain the file through an intent to object form, which will give you the documents used in the decision.
That's important if you disagree with a decision. Having the full file helps you understand the basis of the adjudication.
To give context, W.S.I.B's own reports show that, in 2025, Ontario recorded about 48,711 registered Schedule I claims, representing workplace injuries and illnesses.
Of those, about 17,494 were lost time claims, meaning workers missed time from work due to their injury.
Importantly, nearly 87.9% of people with workplace injury or illness returned to work at their 100% pre-injury earnings within 12 months.
That return to work rate is a key measure of how quickly the system supports recovery and reintegration.
I'm feeling overwhelmed. A coworker yelled at me for months, and now I have panic attacks every workday. Can I file a psychological injury claim with W.S.I.B?
Psychological claims are real and recognized when linked to workplace conditions, like systemic harassment, trauma, or ongoing stress.
Important, you should report it sooner rather than later, document incidents, and involve a medical professional who can describe how the work environment contributed.
Documentation is critical. W.S.I.B looks for medical evidence, consistency, and connection to work.
Records of incidents, notes on how symptoms developed, dates, witnesses, and medical timelines all help strengthen a claim.
Documentation like doctor's notes, treatment plans, and functional restrictions are especially important for psychological claims.
W.S.I.B's Operational Policy Manual, or OPM, is the internal rulebook that adjudicators use to make decisions.
It spells out how injury coverage is interpreted, benefits are calculated, and claims are assessed, including return to work obligations, occupational disease, and benefit entitlements.
These aren't laws themselves, but policy guides used to apply law consistently across cases.
The Employer Classification Manual determines how businesses are classified for premium rates and risk profiles.
This can affect the employer's experience rating and sometimes the expectations around return to work, not because it changes your claim, but because it changes how employers' performance is measured.
The system uses classification codes, adapted specifically for W.S.I.B purposes.
Not all claims are accepted. If a claim is denied, there's an internal review and appeal process.
There are deadlines for objecting to decisions, and having strong documentation helps.
Often seeing a representative or lawyer experienced with W.S.I.B appeals can make a difference.
My claim was submitted months ago, and I'm still hearing nothing from W.S.I.B. What can I do?
Delays happen, especially with psychological claims that require thorough review.
Stay in communication, update your doctor's reports, follow up consistently, and ensure the employer has completed their required reporting forms.
W.S.I.B and employers often work on return-to-work plans that include modified duties.
These plans are based on your functional abilities as described by medical professionals.
Refusing reasonable work without medical justification can affect your benefits.
My doctor says I'm not ready to return to work because of anxiety. W.S.I.B wants me back sooner. Who decides?
W.S.I.B ultimately adjudicates based on evidence, including functional ability.
Doctors provide medical evidence, but W.S.I.B considers a range of factors before assigning return-to-work expectations.
W.S.I.B isn't a punishment system, it's a support system.
W.S.I.B isn't a punishment system, it's a support system. A claim isn't finished once filed, it's active until resolution.
Let's walk through a real, practical scenario that many listeners can relate to: a classic workplace trip and fall injury.
Imagine this. An employee is walking down the hallway on the way to the washroom when they trip over an extension cable that was temporarily powering a printer.
It isn't a major industrial accident, but the impact is real, perhaps a sprained ankle, bruised hip, or soft tissue injury.
This type of incident is exactly the sort of thing W.S.I.B covers whenever the injury arises out of and in the course of employment.
First, report the injury immediately to your employer. This puts the employer on notice and begins the documentation chain.
Even if the injury feels minor, reporting right away matters. Delays make it harder to connect the injury to work duties.
Second, seek medical attention. Even if you think it's just a sprain, get it documented.
Your medical professional will complete a functional abilities form or provide notes that describe exactly what you can and cannot do.
Third, complete the W.S.I.B worker claim form, often called Form 6. Your employer will also complete their sections.
Once the claim is submitted, W.S.I.B will review it and assign an adjudicator.
What happens if you need time off to see the doctor? or can't work because of the injury.
W.S.I.B provides loss of earnings benefits when you miss time from paid work due to an accepted workplace injury and you are unable to perform your regular duties.
If you need to visit a doctor, that visit itself is not something you get paid for by W.S.I.B as a wage, but W.S.I.B will cover the injury and related wage losses if the claim is accepted.
See a doctor before missing work due to the injury. Medical documentation strengthens your claim and links your absence to the workplace event.
If a doctor restricts your duties, for example, no prolonged standing for 1 week, W.S.I.B uses that information to calculate benefits and return to work plans.
W.S.I.B asks 4 key questions with injuries like this. Did the injury happen while performing a work-related activity? Is the connection between the injury and the job credible? Is the medical evidence consistent with the claimed injury? Did the injured worker report the event promptly?
In our hallway trip case, the answer to those questions is usually yes.
Now, a second practical reality. W.S.I.B is not the only legal framework that can affect time away from work.
What's the difference between W.S.I.B compensation and disability accommodations under laws like the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act?
Here's the simplest way to frame it. W.S.I.B covers injuries and illnesses arising out of and in the course of employment, unintentional work incidents. Disability law, like the AODA, or human rights protections, covers intentional discrimination, systemic barriers, and accommodation obligations.
W.S.I.B is insurance for injuries. AODA is rights-based law to prevent discrimination and ensure accessibility.
If you accidentally injure your back at work, W.S.I.B is your source of benefits and wage replacement.
If you have a disability, whether physical, sensory, or psychological, that requires workplace accommodations, then AODA or human rights law applies.
The two systems overlap, but they serve different purposes.
W.S.I.B doesn't require an employer to make accessibility accommodations beyond what's necessary for safety and return to work.
AODA and human rights law do require employers to accommodate to the point of undue hardship.
Imagine a worker hurt their knee in a trip and fall.
W.S.I.B may cover wage loss and approve a graded return to work with modified duties.
Separately, if that same worker has a permanent mobility limitation, the employer may have a duty to accommodate that limitation under disability law, regardless of W.S.I.B.
One system is about covering injury costs.
The other is about ensuring equal access and opportunity.
If an employer offers modified duties, and you cannot perform even those with your disability, you are still entitled to disability accommodations.
But that doesn't automatically mean continued wage replacement, like W.S.I.B.
They can overlap, but the eligibility rules differ.
AODA applies when a disability, as broadly defined, limits your ability to participate in work, even with modified duties.
This includes chronic conditions, sensory disabilities, mental health conditions, and more.
And the employer must accommodate, up to the point of undue hardship.
W.S.I.B compensates unintentional injuries, like slip and fall.
Disability law addresses intentional or systemic barriers in the workplace, like failing to accommodate, discrimination, or exclusion.
One is insurance, the other is rights.
Workers can use W.S.I.B when injured.
Workers can use disability law when accommodations are needed.
In some cases, a worker might use both, but they are distinct paths with distinct tests.
Understanding how W.S.I.B responds to injury helps workers protect themselves and navigate recovery without unnecessary fear.
And it reminds employers that safety includes mental health, not just physical hazards.
That's why this podcast exists, not to scare you, but to prepare you.
That's all for today's episode. Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, and tune in next week for more episodes on working in Ontario.